Afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, July 16th, 2025, and this is our 325th week of doing the Midweek Roundup. We began this journey 7 years ago this week, and so proud to be bringing this to you every week, minus a few travel days throughout the last few years where I've been overseas or at conferences where I couldn't do a live. Always coming to you on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time with answers to 3 questions we hear every week from international educators. And we'll get to those questions in just a minute, but before we do, we want to give a special shout out to those of you watching live, either on Facebook, YouTube, or LinkedIn, and those of you watching it on repeat on those channels, or listening to the audio-only podcast. Thank you for becoming part of the SMIE Consulting listening family or watching family. We're so glad that you're a part of that conversation. And if you're wondering, and if you're new to the Roundup, we take our questions we answer here on Wednesday afternoon from our newsletter that comes out Monday morning at 9 o'clock Eastern Time. If you're getting that email version of the newsletter, and the newsletter is called All the SMIE News Fit to Share, and it comes to you, as I said, every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. I'm dropping the link to the email edition into the chat here. If you are looking to subscribe, you can do that one of 2 ways. If you go to that link, smieconsulting.org/subscribe, you scroll down to the subscribe section, and you can either subscribe by hitting on the subscribe button, entering your details, and then getting the newsletter delivered to you every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern. But you also have the option right below that. We've just added that to the website. That you can you can subscribe via LinkedIn. The LinkedIn subscription has been available, but we haven't linked it on the site previously. Now you get to do that directly. And between the 2 versions, the email and the LinkedIn version, we have over 2,600 subscribers that are weekly getting that newsletter content in their inboxes or in their LinkedIn notifications. So really happy that so many people are making this newsletter a part of our weekly edification, internationally speaking. And what we do here on the Roundup is we take the themes we see developing in some of those news stories where you get our kind of hot takes on Monday morning on what those issues mean for us in international education. And then here on Wednesday, we kind of see those themes and answer a little bit more in depth, kind of give you our next level perspectives on long-term implications of these stories, trends that we're seeing, and how we can perhaps use those to enhance what we do in international education here in the United States. So that's the goal each week. And as we do, we're going to get started with our first question of the day. And that is, are we diversifying how we deliver our degrees overseas? And that's a little bit of a tongue twister. How are we diversifying how we deliver our degrees overseas? We talked about this in recent weeks about how the trend over the last 10, 15 years or so has been for U.S. international admissions offices to diversify where we recruit students from, because we were becoming, in a lot of cases, over-dependent on 1 or 2 countries for the majority of our student body, international student body. And that's probably the case at most schools. India and China represent in the U.S. over 50%, 53%, 54% of all international students currently in the U.S. studying. But they're the 2 biggest countries in the world by far, and they're always going to be in and around number 1 and number 2. The question is, how do we diversify into double digits, more than just those 2 countries, from other 10, 15 other countries around the world, so that we're not overly dependent on 1 or 2 or 3 countries? And so that has been the conversation for most U.S. colleges in recent years. But now, particularly with the onset of the Trump administration 2.0, we're asking the questions because of all the steps the government has taken to, if not decrease the favorability of the United States as a destination through its rhetoric, anti-immigrant rhetoric, some of the actions it's taken domestically to arbitrarily cancel SEVIS records of over 4,000 students in March that eventually were reinstated. They used AI, improperly set up AI, generative AI prompts to find any international student that had interactions with law enforcement, and that became a very broad net that was cast and included students that were rounded up for parking violations, speeding tickets, and other things that are not certainly violations of their immigration status, but were being used by the government to call them out of to make them out of status and terminate their F1 student ability. We saw how many institutions made the awful mistake of telling these students to self-deport, to leave the country, and then try to get new visas to come back in. And those have been met with very low success rate. And for those students who tried that, if they had just stayed put for a couple, 3 weeks, they would have gotten status back. Obviously negatively impacting people who were in OPT situations and their ability to work, that they couldn't work if they were on OPT if their SEVIS record got terminated, and whether or not their employers decided to wait for them to get reinstated. All of the many lives that were thrown into chaos, over 4,000 students. We also have the negative impact of that kind of damaging, arbitrary policy decision-making that wasn't well thought out. You have student visas for anti-Israel protests. You've heard the rhetoric used by Rubio again, who's become quite disappointing as a Secretary of State, given his past history as a moderate when it came to international education, very supportive of it generally. It's the statements on revoking Chinese student visas aggressively as well. That lasted for about a week. No action was really taken. And then you saw Chinese students welcomed with the new trade deal with China. So all the rhetoric has been negative. There have been very few highlights. You saw the travel ban implemented. We've seen a lot of other things that have negatively tarred the U.S. as a destination. And that has led to a lot of challenges. Most recently, during the NAFSA conference, we had the pause on visa interviews for a month during peak visa season, where 70% of incoming international students every year get their visas between May and August. And in those 4 months, 70% of the volume of students that might be coming to the U.S. That first month, a third of the way through that schedule, from the end of May through middle of to end of June, you saw no new international student visa appointments scheduled, when those up until end of May were already scheduling through into August. So recent activity has shown us that our students are applicants at the University of Akron that hadn't gotten their visa appointments before that May pause are now, when they've been applying in the last few weeks, 3 weeks for visa appointments, aren't able to get visa appointments until February for fall starts. So they're out, having to defer, and even February is after the start of our spring term. So the U.S. mission in India has absolutely dropped the ball, and they have not anticipated the capacity. They haven't made arrangements for the increased social media vetting that's required. That can all be done virtually. Doesn't need to be done with a student unless there's questions in person. And a lot of you now also see the challenges with getting the visa appointments and the visa interview itself with the new social media vetting, that it's making it increasingly impossible for students to jump through the increasingly smaller hoops that the government has thrown up, increasingly smaller multiple hoops that the government has thrown up to prevent them from enrolling this fall. So it's a system that is broken. The visa system is broken, and only the strong will survive. And countries that maybe don't have as high volume of students, it may be easier to get visas coming for the fall. But for the majority countries that are high volume, in terms of India, in terms of China, the visa pause has caused absolute chaos. And reports are from agents in both of those countries, India and China, and some high volume ones like Korea. Even there's delays in processing, delays in interviews until almost to the end of August already. So chances of getting emergency appointments or more slots being opened up when there's increased expectations on the visa officers for the social media vetting. So there's all sorts of challenges that are preventing regular business as usual for the expectations for this coming fall. It's a compilation of errors in the last 6 months the administration has made, overreaches, underprepared, half-baked policies before they get rolled out that might have had national security implications for the motivation for doing them, but the implementation has failed miserably on almost every level. So getting back to the question, are we diversifying how we're delivering our degrees overseas, and why should we? That's kind of what all that prelude was to justify how we have an opportunity now in the United States to do things that we haven't done before. For the greater majority, 90%, 95%, 98% of all U.S. colleges and universities, we saw that have transnational education opportunities that are available to their students, interested students overseas. We know about those that have campuses abroad, the branch campuses that the U.S. has had in Qatar, in Education City for a number of years, almost 2 decades now. The campuses that NYU has had in Shanghai and Abu Dhabi, and a couple other locations. You see Webster University and a few others that have done the branch campus thing well, or at least have tried it and have received plaudits for it, but we're amateurs as a whole in the United States on doing transnational education. I'm referencing first an article from Incora that points out that since the pre-pandemic, 2019, the numbers of students, international students doing online degrees has increased, and the numbers are, let's see what the actual numbers are. I had that more than doubled in the course of 5 years, or 4 years, from 2019 to 2023. They were at about 22,900 in 2019, and we're at 46,800 in 2023. So that's more than doubling in growth. If you take, and that's taking out, it's been a fairly consistent growth. But obviously during the pandemic, 2020 and 2021, huge numbers of students on the graduate side. This is online graduate enrollment outside the United States is profiled in this Ancora piece. It was up to 85,700 in 2020, but down to 56,000 in 2021. So the upward trajectory from 22 pre-pandemic to roughly 23,000 in 2019 to almost 47,000 in 2023 shows the trajectory is certainly on an upward trend. So this is one way of doing transnational education in terms of delivery of degrees. That's an important thing to remember because there are other ways to do it. And part of that is our example by these branch campuses, and we've seen a significant increase in branch campuses in countries like Kazakhstan, of all places, as a place where institutions have been setting up shop. In terms of U.S., there's 1 or 2, but in terms of other institutions from other countries have been successful in either partnering with a Kazakh university themselves to set up their own campus, which is probably the least costly way of doing physical delivery of classes overseas, or those that have huge endowments like the NYUs or the Dukes of the world that set up their own campuses. Duke actually partnered with Kunshan in China, but there are many British universities who follow this partner model in China. Liverpool Jiao Tong is probably the most notable one that have had campuses in China for several decades, at least 2 decades. So there's three ways: online education, bricks and mortar facilities of your own, or partnering with a university in country where you want to deliver your education in person. I've mentioned to colleagues recently that this is a new chapter in my career, new area of developing expertise that I'm working on now is in the transnational area. We're doing at the University of Akron, we're exploring some what we're calling campus models, delivering 1 or more of our top programs at the undergraduate level fully in another country on a university partner's campus, where we do a mix of ways. We'll deliver courses working with faculty members from that institution to teach courses that they are already doing that are aligned with what we would have as one of maybe our general education classes or lab classes. Some of our other gen ed classes that maybe they don't have an equivalent of, we can teach via online learning. And then a third option is for our faculty, and particularly in the upper division classes of these majors, to go during the summer months to teach those upper division sections of upper division classes in the designated majors, with the goal of delivering. One option would be to deliver the full bachelor's degree experience in person and hybrid in another country through a partner university's facilities. So we split revenue with that institution in terms of the tuition that's generated, and they get to use that as a recruitment tool to help attract institutions by delivering a top U.S. program on their campus. English taught degrees have been exploding around the world, and branch campuses that are teaching English taught degrees are the ones that are certainly seeing the greatest amount of growth. So that's happening. Are we diversifying how we're doing that? That's the question we all need to be answering or asking ourselves. The other piece of this, I mentioned the Kazakh model. There's also a real fear in higher ed circles at the moment that we are the looming crisis, if you will. When we there's another article by Phil Laubeck and Hans DeWitt, two of the old timers, the strongest old voices in the field of international education. They have a new article in University World News that talks about these significant issues about what is the crisis really all about, where are we heading. They talk about transnational education is part of that crisis that we're experiencing. We saw the Aussies do it during COVID by setting up these offshore locations for students to take the first year of their program, but until things return to normal. You see the Brits have been doing it longest doing transnational education longer than most of us. And I've reported this stat a couple different times, but you've seen over recent years that in England or in the UK there have been more UK university degrees issued outside of Britain than inside, so to international students, and that has come about as a fruit of their labor from the transnational education efforts that they've been working on over the last couple decades through the three basic types of programs that they're able to offer. So this is something that we'll see increasingly, I think, from U.S. institutions getting into this field, getting into this space, to identify partners to explore, like ASU, like Purdue Global, University of Maryland, University College, Global Maryland, whatever they're calling it now, Global Arizona or Arizona Global. There's a number of these large state public universities that have really entered into the online space significantly, even pre-pandemic, but have ramped up since to really target overseas enrollments through their online education programs. Now, there are a lot of I's to dot and T's to cross to truly make that work in terms of, is that degree recognized in the country that you're offering it and targeting? Are there any tax implications for payments that are coming through, digital service taxes that are charged for services that are given overseas or online? So all of these things should be factored into planning, and only a well-developed online education office can really do that. And so that certainly is a must if you're going to go down the online education route for delivering your education to students overseas, to offset the potential losses you're going to be experiencing of inbound students to the U.S. in the coming years. So that's what we have on that first question. I do want to shift gears to the second one, and this is it's been realized a little bit. This came out last week from the ISSS United Facebook group. I caught on to this, that some very diligent DSO had been on the State Department site and had found that the countries that were in that group of 36 countries that were on the potential expanded travel ban list. We now have the initial 19 that impact all international students from those countries are not able to come, including Iran, Myanmar, and a couple others that are not big centers, but have sent students to the U.S. And most everyone has sent students, but these particular ones, obviously the 19, cannot now because there are no exemptions carved out for international students. So on this ISS United Facebook group, someone pointed out that on the travel.state.gov site, the visa reciprocity tables for those 36 countries, or 29 countries, 36 countries, 36 countries, which includes 25 African nations, had all had their visa durations and number of entries per visa edited or changed to single entry, 3 months. So that is kind of a midway step, right? It's not a complete revocation and potentially adding them to the travel ban country list, but it is a sign that it's those that visas are given to are not going to have multiple entry. They're not going to have long durations when they can make multiple trips in a long period of time. That basically means anytime that person needs to leave the country, they'll have to get a new visa before they can come back in to finish their studies. And this is in line with what they're trying to do with the DS, getting rid of DS, which we talked about previously. And that goes away, then all international students will, anytime they leave the country, will have to get a new visa because they'll likely have overstayed their maximum visa duration. So perhaps if they do it comparatively to the reciprocity tables where it's supposed to be based on, well, they're giving us 6-month visas when we go as students, then they should get 6-month visas here. If it uses that logic, then it's going to be a chaos, and it means anytime the student leaves the country, after a semester of study, they need to get a new visa. Or if the more moderate way, if it has to get rid of DS, which we hope to God it doesn't, that would mean that, well, whatever the length of their program would be, with maybe a semester or a year or two grace, given OPT options, that would be the new end date, really, for their visas. So we'll see what happens with these. That travel ban will the extended travel ban become a reality? I don't think it will, and maybe this is a small sliver of brightness in an otherwise gloomy day or a gloomy 6 months or gloomy year of administrative decision making to say that, well, at least they're not going to be banned entirely. Because if those other 36 countries get banned, we talked about that last week. You see on my map here, we see a lot of dots. These dots are all combination of colors. There's the orange and the red from the initial one. Then there's some red ones on here that have a P on it as prospective or potential travel ban countries. And if you look at Africa this way, the whole continent, most of sub-Saharan Africa, including some of North Africa, including Egypt, is going to be on that travel ban list. So that would include Nigeria, Ghana, and some other big centers in Egypt from Africa. So you can pretty much write off African student recruitment if that travel ban gets implemented for the next 3 years. So lots of positives, but will that become a reality? Probably not, given this interim step that it seems the State Department has made. Now, one of the things we will look at, I'm sure it's going to come up in the coming weeks and months, because we've seen last Friday, and didn't make the news in time for this week's news, but because I was traveling, didn't have a chance to put it in the mix. But you saw over 1,000 people lose their job at State Department, including a number in ECA, where Education USA is founded. Still haven't heard details on if and when any of those folks are impacted, or if the Education USA grant that IIE runs, managing the REACs and programming for us in higher ed side, if that's affected at all. Hope not. But the number of State Department folks losing their job. Talking to a colleague of mine, best friend from high school, and a roommate of mine in college and grad school. He joined the Foreign Service, U.S. Foreign Service, been a diplomat overseas for most of his career. He's had a couple of U.S. stints. But I checked in with him just to make sure he wasn't part of the cuts last week, and he shared over the weekend that there are going to be some overseas cuts, because most of the folks that were cut this past week were DC based or US based, and that there are overseas cuts expected. Now, in the ironically the broad scope of things, when I think about two things that make our visa process onerous for international students, two of the more prominent things that I would change if I had the choice would be, one, to make F1 status dual intent, so that 214B is not a reason to deny a student a visa, that if they want to come and stay after they're done and eventually work and potentially become a permanent resident, because it is a legal pathway, we shouldn't force them to lie if that's their intent when they're applying for a non-immigrant student visa. So making F1 dual intent, that would be a huge relief to the 214B piece. And thanks, Ben, for chiming in. And embassy staffing, this is the other piece of this, Ben. And this is maybe pie in the sky for me. The other part of what I would do is get rid of the visa interview. Because to Ben's point here, embassy staffing will be an issue, because there are overseas cuts coming to State Department posts around the world. And maybe, in their warped way of thinking, since most of what the government seems to be making decisions on is security, compliance from the countries, getting information on foreign nationals from those countries that are applying for visas to us. Part of the reason for the travel bans to the existing 19 that we have is because those countries are either rogue states or do not provide reciprocal release of information, security information, crime information on applicants for visas from those countries. And that's why a number on the proposed travel ban list have been given 60 days. A few weeks ago, we were given 60 days to do the same, to either meet our standards or to go on the travel ban list themselves. And with everything this government does, there's always going to be a get out clause. Trying to keep track of all the tariff rates that are being charged is kind of like a bingo card game. We don't know what that's going to look like from week to week. Tariff rates changes, deadlines are changing, so travel bans may be rescinded if a country improves their national security protocols in terms of sharing information with us on potential visa applicants. If that happens, great. But it seems to be that the social media stuff is all being done independent of the actual interview. All the security clearance stuff is all being done independent of the actual interview. And we are, of the big four big four receivers of international students, we're the only one requiring an in-person interview for students. The Brits, the Aussies, the Canadians all farm it out. In terms of the actual processing of the visa paperwork, it's not done if it is done in country, it's done by a third party. Others have processing centers around the world, so the processing time on visas can actually be a little bit longer, but it's not dependent on the physical visa interview for the paperwork to actually happen. Students can apply technically 365 days before the program start date. Can, with their I-20, pay their visa fee, pay their DS-160 fee. And what we'll talk about next, in the next question, the visa reciprocity fee, and that fun new twist in the tail in the one big beautiful bill that was passed that no one knew about until after the fact. This visa reciprocity fee is now basically more than doubling the visa application fee process for students to over $430 in Vietnam, for example. One of our agent partners just got in touch with us yesterday about that. So will the travel ban become a reality? But one hope on the staffing issue for these for embassies around the world, we know that that's been an issue with the extra burdens of visa interviews, with the social media vetting and the delay of a month, and they're all backed up already. You maybe and this is hope against hope probably, but if there is a there's a downsizing going on. There's efficiency, if Doge is to be believed, of processes that are in effect inefficient, and God knows the visa interview process is inefficient. This is all the Brits have just gone to e-visas for students. So is this a way of modernizing our visa interview process where it's not going to be required in person and really won't be dependent on a physical visit to an embassy or consulate? Maybe I'm gonna hang on to some small glimmer of hope there. That might be that would be a positive in my guess, and only in a small few cases where if there are questions, those kind of social media questions that do require an in-person response, then they come in for an interview. Maybe that might be a way to solve this. I don't know, but that's wishful thinking, perhaps. One last thing, the last question I'll touch on very briefly today. We're already at time, but I want to make sure I get this in because it's not just affecting Australia. And will increased funding requirements impact Aussie-bound international students? Now, here's one thing you may not be familiar with if you're not paying attention to how students apply for visas in Canada, Australia, UK. But in all those countries, they have to document funding, much like they do for us. But in the US, they have to document funding with the individual institutions they're applying to based on the cost of living and the I-20 costs of that particular institution that they're applying to. So, but whereas with Australia, whereas UK, Canada, they're required to show a flat fee amount and per country. It's usually $20,000, $25,000, $26,000 depending on the country, equivalent of that amount. So Australia has jacked up their numbers that international students now need to show. Canada has done that recently as well. UK has done something similar. They've also had some back-end increases as well to or maximum salaries minimum salaries that students who want to go the graduate route can apply for. So a lot of different things. So they've also increased English language requirements and a couple other things, and their visa fees they've increased in Australia, much like we just did with this visa integrity fee that is supposedly refundable, but who knows how that process will work. It's very opaque and doesn't, like most things this government has done, doesn't include a lot of details. So will that funding increase in funding requirements impact Aussie-bound students? When it comes to that piece alone, probably not, because students are creative and find ways to get their bank statements that show, surprisingly, just the right amount or just a little bit more than the right amount they need for a visa. So that I don't see as a major obstacle. So I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about that. But we certainly have a lot of meaty issues each week to discuss, and we'll see which way the road turns next. But there's something new and exciting, not in a good way, every week it seems. But do wish you all the very best, and keep abreast of the news through the newsletter on Monday mornings, and certainly check in and subscribe to the Roundup on Wednesdays. So thanks very much for being a part of the conversation. Look forward to chatting with you soon. Cheers.